going to study about the recompound particles, very important particle, and the first of the eight dependent particles. So, what are dependent particles? We have already discussed what are dependent particles. Dependent particles are the particles which has to depend on not only one factor, but two factors. The first one, which is universal to both dependent and independent particle, is the usage case. So every particle has a different usage case. So, and the other thing is about the second factor, which is the usage, or which is the usage of these particles, or the rules which tells us which particle should follow which name, dependent on their on the suffix letter of that particular name. So since this is dependent particle, it will depend on both of these. The first one is the usage case, which is known as dön jor. Jor means to associate with, or to be associated with a sentence on the basis of its usage case. And dajor, which we have already discussed. Da means sound, so it refers to the particular sound, which is the suffix letter. So dajor associated on the basis of the suffix letter of a name that it follows. Dönjor associated with a sentence on the basis of its usage case. So the meaning of the connective particle that we have already discussed many times, saying that it changes. It is a variable. It's not a constant meaning. It doesn't have a constant meaning. Rather, it changes with different sentences, depends on the usage case. So it's because there are many different usage cases that the meaning of these connective particles changes. So recompound particle, along with the vocative particle, is two of the particle which actually, even though are known as the connective particle, but they don't connect any two narratives. So they don't connect any two narratives. Rather, they are used with a single narrative and are associated with a single narrative. So when I say narrative, a narrative could be a single word. A narrative could be a single word. It could be multiple words, meaning it could be a phrase, it could be a sentence, or it could be multiple sentence, and it could be a paragraph, it could be a verse, and it could be an entire story, or entire writing. So narrative are very varying. So it varies from the most fundamental, that is a name, word, to a combination that builds up to be either a sentence, a phrase, a paragraph, a verse, an entire paragraph, or multiple paragraph, or in some cases, an entire piece of writing. So therefore, lertu, in this case, lertu has these many different usage cases, which we will discuss. So, okay, so lertu. And now, first, we will start by reciting the particular verse that is of the lertu, that tells us about the lertu in the Tree of Excellence speech. Okay, from the Tree of Excellence. Kongo tono pomo ho rolo soto lertu de zotsi de du je cha. So, kongo tono pomo ho rolo soto lertu de zotsi de du je cha. Okay, let me just here we have to change this. Okay. 走起的对这样cha. So this is this is not the entire verse that tells us about the lerdu, but in this particular verse, the first and the second line, what it does is it introduces us. It introduces us to the function, which is lerdu, and the particles which does this function. So it introduces us to these 11 different particles, which are known as the recompound particles. So there are 11 recompound particles. And this particular word, lerdu, what it does is that it tells us the usage of these particles. The use of these particles is for the case of lerdu. So so in this particular, in these two lines, if we are to say that this does that, we must know the definition of this particular word, that is lerdu, to say that it does shows us the usage. So there are 11 recompound particles, and all of these 11 recompound particles function to do what? To do lerdu. Okay, so lerdu gi kode. Sorry, this is incorrect. So it's better to actually have it in the 左是的对这样差。Yes, 左是的对这样差。Yes, this we will be. I will be telling you about this. So it's always better to make the presentation because the editing is much quicker in this. So lerdu kode, meaning the definition of lerdu. So I have written it in Tibetan. And by now you are very familiar with me. So if I have written something in Tibetan, that means that you'll have to memorize this. I'm very sorry, but it's a good practice. I know that you're memorizing all those different texts, but I humbly request it doesn't have to be immediately, but once you're done with the memorization of the text, that is the Tree of Excellent Speech, then please start memorizing these definitions in Tibetan. So the definition of lerdu. Kabubki juechi tun koso chenam tarjane lerdu joba shenam meba. Duwar chebe tsitela sir. So kabubki juechi tun means the narrative, the current narrative. The current narrative, koso chenam, te, which is connective particle. So connective particles such as ko, which is the 11 particles that we have. So these are the 11 particles such as ko, are written at the end of this current narrative, are always written at the end of this current narrative. This narrative could be a single word or a name. This narrative could be multiple words, such as a phrase. This narrative could be a sentence. This narrative could be multiple sentences. This narrative could be a paragraph. This narrative could be multiple paragraphs. This narrative could be an entire piece of writing or entire book, but it's always written at the end of the current narrative, har, which means end. It's written at the ending or end of the current narrative or the statement. This is Salabdata. So I have written it in that 1 minute. It is the. It's the do. So tar, which means at the end. So at the end of the current narrative, when you use one of these 11 particle, depending on their usage case. So one of these 11 particle, depending on the, sorry, not the usage case, on the suffix letter, you will be using one of these 11 connective recompound particles. What it does is that a sentence or a narrative that may come Again, after this, mepa negates, meaning no more statement in the context of current narrative is continuing from that part. Meaning that the moment that you have written this particle, it means that the narrative that is between the starting to the point that you have written this real compound particle, this becomes a single unit of narrative. That any narrative written after that is a new narrative and is not the continuation of this current narrative. And the particle that particle that confirms that this point is the point that there is no continuation of the current context or current narrative is known as the recompound particle. So this is the function. Whenever you see one of these 11 recompound particle at the end of a sentence or a paragraph or any piece of writing, may it be a story, it means that from the very starting point to the point that you have this particle, that recompound particle, is a unit, a single unit. It's a single unit, meaning that they come under current narrative and that whatever is written after the usage of this particle is a new narrative by its own. That it's not the continuation of this current narrative. It doesn't continue from here. It's an entirely new narrative. So this is written here. So Joba Shenam Meba. Joba Shen means another new statement. So there is no other new statement that continues from here. Meba, it says no more statement from this point. Drubpay means to conclude, and then to say that it's concluded here, meaning that the entire meaning of that narrative is concluded to this point. And this type of connective particle is known as recompound particle. So in this case, you have to say that even though recompound particle is not necessarily connecting two narratives, but it's a connective particle just by the voice of its name. So it's just given the name connective particle. But by the function, it's not a connective particle. Rather, it's a particle that shows that a certain narrative has ended to this point. Okay, so the English definition is, these are connective particle such as ko. So it could be either of these 11 particle, which when stated at the end of the statement. So the statement is it's a very vast concept. A statement or a narrative could be as small as a word or a name to as large as a couple of pages or to a book. So it comes at the end of a statement. And when it comes to the end of the statement or narrative, it shows the ending or it concludes the statement or narrative. And when I say statement, I mean the current statement or current narrative. It doesn't mean that the entire narrative is finished. It just means that from the starting to the point where this particle is written, that particular narrative is now finished. And that whatever you're going to write after the recompound particle is going to be a new narrative by its own self. So therefore, the most important thing to focus here is the term non-continuation. What is a non-continuation? It means that it doesn't continue from this point. This is the point where it is. It doesn't continue. And what does not continue? The current narrative, the current statement, whatever you were speaking before the usage of this particle. Statement and narrative. Statement and narrative is here. It's just an option. You can either say end of a statement or you can say end of a narrative. These two at this point, in this context, these two are the same. It's the same. So no difference when I say statement or narrative. So it can be understood as which when stated at the end of statement, or you can say which when stated at the end of a narrative. So no difference. Here, just because it's called narrative doesn't mean that it's spoken. Narrative as something that's written. So therefore, no difference here. So same. So lasso. So therefore, no non-continuation. What do we mean by non-continuation? We mean that the current narrative or the current statement, for example, if I was speaking about the summer, and then I was speaking about the summer in the entire paragraph, and at the end of the paragraph, I used the recompound particle. It means that I have done speaking about the summer. And whatever I'm going to speak afterwards has nothing to do with the summer. So that is the non-continuation of current statement or current narrative. And it doesn't have to be a paragraph. Here I have made it, I've given an obvious example by using a paragraph. And therefore we see that lerdu is also very important, a very important part of the first grammatical case. Because what did we speak about the first grammatical case? We said that it should be individual. And the concept of individual is strongly supported by the usage of lerdu. Individual unit of statement or individual narrative. So therefore, here we see that which means these 11 particles, these 11 continuative particles, ko, ngo, o, no, o, mo, o, ro, lo, so, to, are known as the recompound particles, and they function as lerdu. And what is a lerdu? This is what a lerdu is. It's the conclusion of a current narrative. Now the last line, it states, which means it is also known as zokzi or dadu. Okay, let me explain what these. So these are named for the same word. These are the name for the same word. It's synonymous. It's a synonyms for lerdu. And in Tibetan we say Tunji Mingi Namchang. Let me just write it. I think I have, what have I done? Okay, so, so okay, so I think it will work like this now. Okay. Tunji Minki I don't know why the Tunji Minki. So there is a ra here and a na. I don't know why it's not going down. Namtang. Let me see why it's not working. It worked now. So let me send it to everyone. Tunjik Minki Namtang. So Tunji Minki Namtang is synonyms in Tibetan. Tunjik means having same meaning. Minki Namtang means having different names for the same meaning. So Tunji Minki Namtang is something that we will discuss a little bit, but more interestingly, we will discuss something called Ngunju, one of the 5 minor sciences So in Tibetan, we talk about the 10 signs with 5 major signs and 5 minor signs. The 5 major signs, including the, we have the thing that we're learning, that is Drubpay, which is the science of the sound, grammar. Sorikpa, manufacturing or making things, more or less like engineering. Swarikpa, the Tibetan medicine. Naungtönrikpa, which is the Buddhism, and Temarikpa, which is the epistemology. And these 5 are known as the 5 major signs, and 5 minor signs, which have things like opera. We have opera. We have these onju. We have poetry, astrology. So, I don't seem to have recall. I don't seem to recall the last one, but there are 10 in total. So Monju is one of them, and it is an interesting one. So we will discuss it in later classes on name. So these two, Dzogtsi and Dadu, are the same name for, a different name for the same thing. Lerdu, Dzogtsi, Dadu. Lerdu means that ler means a continuation. Du means to conclude, meaning concluding without continuation. It's lerdu. Dzogtsik, dzog means complete and completion. Sik means word, which shows that something is complete. There's no continuation. If something is complete, there's no need of continuation. So there's no continuation. Dzogtsik is a word of completion or word that shows completion. Da means more or less, it means like a message or to say something. It's a structure, or more or less it talks about narrative. Okay, so it directly says narrative. Dadu means to conclude the narrative, meaning there's no continuation of this narrative. It concludes here. So these are 3 names, but all of these have same meaning. So Lerdu can also be known as Dadu or Dzogtsi. Lerdu as recompounding. Lerdu as recompound. Dzogtsi as completion word, and Dadu as conclusion of narrative. So all of these are similar. All of these are same, but same meaning, but different names. So, okay, so continuing. So, there are 11 connective particles of recompound particles, which are ko, ngo, to, no, po, mo, ho, ro, lo, so, to, jeso. Jeso means these are it. So these are ko, ngo, to, no, po, mo, ho, ro, lo, so, to. So 11 of these are connective particles. And one thing to remember is that except for ta, all of these are jinjuk or suffix letter. All of these are ka, nga, ta, na, pa, ma, ha, ralasa are all suffix letter, except for to, which is not a suffix letter. Okay, so there are 2 synonyms for recompound particle. These are Dzogtsik, completion word, or Dadu, conclusion of narrative. Okay, now comes the more interesting part, which talks about the Dajor. So Dajor is the rules for the particles on following the name on the basis of suffix letter. So now we know that Lerdu itself is not a Lerdu is not an independent particle. It's a dependent particle. What does it depend on? It depends on the suffix letter of the name it wants to associate or follow. So what are the rules? And rules are already stated in the Tree of Excellence speech. So this is the rule. From the Tree of Excellence speech. So So the word 长月, let me just write it. Because, yes, sorry, I had to exit the full screen because it doesn't seem to work with this full. So, 长月, 또. So 长月, the word 长月, 타자, 닥탈, 영주, 다 are all same. So the word 长月 or 타자 or 닥탈 or 영주, 다 are all the same. All of these mean the post suffix letter ta. The post suffix letter ta. For example, in this word, we see that ra is the foundation of name because it has the vowel. Then la is the suffix, and ta is the post suffix. So let me actually do it here because it's much bigger. The screen is, and let me take 100. So okay. So rilt. Let me just make it black and then probably 200 then. Okay, so you see that here we have ra, which has the vowel, therefore it is the foundation of name, followed by another consonant, and the consonant that follows or is positioned after the foundation of name is known as the suffix letter, the one that comes after jenjuk or jejuk. So jenjuk, you see this happening, right? Because of the smoothness in the transition. Instead of jejuk, it becomes jenjuk. But okay, so it's not correct. Definitely, it sounds a little much more smoother, but it's not correct. So ra, la, and then the consonant that is positioned after the suffix is known as post suffix, yangjuk. And so for these type of words or names which has the ta as a suffix letter is known as tata. This is an example of 长月, or you can call it tata, or you can call it 영주, 다, or 닥탈. So 长月, 타타, 영주, 다, 닥탈. All of these are synonyms for the word 영주, 다, the post suffix 다. So here in the text, they have used 长月. So for the words which have 다 as a post suffix letter, use the particle 또. So let me go here. 长月, 또. So for those of the name, which has 영주 다 or post suffix 다 as the has the post suffix 다, this particular name, you have to use the recompound particle 또. Now tame, maybe it's first time we're discussing this. So tame, ta means the end. So it's the end, something that comes at the end. And normally ta could, so what do we mean by ta here? We mean the ta of the different positions of the consonant. At the first, we have the prefix, then honjuk, then we have mingshi, foundation of name basis. Then we have jenju, suffix letter, and then finally we have prefix letter. And so for these post suffix letter yangju, and the suffix letter jenju, normally we just refer ta as the jenju, ta and Jinju are synonymous. So ta and Jinju, just take the ta and Jinju are synonymous, same meaning. It's same if you say ta or Jinju. So me is the negation saying no. So ta me means no Jinju. So if a word doesn't have a suffix letter, that is known as tame. So the text says to. If you have the Yangju or the post-suffix letter ta, use the particle to. If you have a word or name that doesn't have a suffix letter, tame, then use ho as a recompound particle. Shen means other. So other means those other type of word, which is neither the one that has the post-suffix letter ta or are without a suffix letter, meaning all of those words which has suffix letter or in some case has the suffix letter sa, the Yangjuk sa or suffix letter sa. So in those cases, Shen means all of those which are neither the word which has ta as a suffix letter, chaoyue, or is without a suffix letter, tame. All of this meaning word which has suffix letter or words or name which has suffix letter, and also the name which has sa as a post suffix letter. In those cases, Shen mingte jetunjar, which means now we're talking about the cases. So let us leave the case where we have the post suffix letter sa. Instead, we're only going to focus on the cases where we have the post suffix letter. So all the other cases where there is only the suffix letter, make sure that you use the particle which has the same foundation of name as the suffix letter of that name. What do I mean by that? Let me explain. So what do I mean by that? So if it has a suffix letter ka, the particle will be ko. If it has a suffix letter nga, it will be followed by ngo. If it has a suffix letter ta, it will be to. Na, no, pa, po, ma, mo, ha, ho, ra, ro, la, lo, sa, so. So all of these 10 particles has the foundation of name for the particle here, similar to the 10 suffix letter. And that is the reason why these have the similar foundation of name, because all of these particles will follow the name which has the same suffix letter as they have the foundation of name. Since ko has ka, it will follow a suffix letter ka. Ngo has nga, it will follow a suffix letter nga. Po has ta, it will follow a suffix letter ta, meaning a name that has a suffix letter ta. No has na, so it will follow a name which has suffix letter na. Po has pa, it will follow a name which has a suffix letter pa. Mo has ma, so it will follow a name that has suffix letter ma. Ho has ha, so it will follow a suffix letter that has a name that has a suffix letter ha. Ro has ra, so it will follow a name which has suffix letter ra. Lo has la, it will follow a name which has suffix letter la. So has sa, it will follow a name with a suffix letter sa. And finally, this one is the case with the post suffix letter ta. So it will. Okay, so therefore, chaoyue to, if it is a post suffix letter, so I'll just go here. If it's a post suffix letter, ta, then it will have to as a recompound particle. If it doesn't have any suffix letter, tame, ta meaning post suffix letter jinjuk. If it doesn't have jinjuk, or which means if it doesn't have suffix letter, then it will be followed by ho. But all of the rest of the case, which means all of the cases where you have the suffix letter, use the particle which has the same foundation of name that has that to the suffix letter of the name. Okay, so please look at this table. So we have, first we have these 10 suffix letter, and then we have the particle that it follows. Since it has ka, a name, if a name has a ka, it will be followed by ko. For example, yakko, which means yak. So we see that in this case, the narrative is a single name, which is a naming word, which is an arbitrary naming word, a name of an animal, followed by ko. Because the suffix letter is ka, ko. The second one is nga, ngo. Now, in this case, we see that it's a proper sentence, so it can also follow a proper sentence. So narrative or statement is a very wide concept, a vast concept. So a lot of variation. Dini lopche tango. So since tang has a suffix letter nga, will be followed by ngo. This is school playground. So you see that here the recompound particle is following a sentence. Then ta, with the suffix letter ta, it will be followed by to. Shinto kito. And in this case, we see that it is just a multiple word or name, or in other words, it's just a phrase. It's not an entire sentence. Ki has a suffix letter ta, therefore it's followed by recompound particle to. Very joyful. Shinto means very. Similar to hachang. And ki means joyful or happy. So if a word or if a name has a suffix letter na, it will be followed by no. Mendi hachang ki penno. See, this is a sentence. This medicine is very beneficial. Since pen has na as a suffix letter, it will be followed by no. Pa, po, followed by po. Shinki gyabdu kapo. Hide behind the tree. This is an entire sentence. Since it is cup, it has pa as a suffix letter, followed by po. Ma, mo. Jaksam. Here it is just a derived name, derived actual name. Jaksam means iron bridge, so the iron bridge. So it's a single, this narrative is a single name. And since it has ma as a suffix letter, mo. Ha, ho. If a name has ha as a suffix letter, it will be followed by ho. Lungbe taho. And here you will say that, oh, you said that, but how do you justify this? You say that, but how will you justify this? How will you justify this? And this is justified because it becomes ha, ho. And since it's now it's a case, many of you may think that if I say that it's because of repetition of ha, it is ho, then many of you will say that, oh, but in that case, can't we do the same for others? Actually, we sometimes do it, but it's a special, it's a sort of a property of this particular word, that is ha. So most of the time when we are using this particular, which is ho, we tend to what we do is we tend to clear out this punctuation. But now if we clear this punctuation, this becomes a word that doesn't even exist because nothing can come after ha as a suffix letter. So what is this ho? So therefore, to clarify this complication, we just add ho here. And that is the reason why this is the only particle in recompound words. Sure, we see these days things like this, and I'm also guilty of using this many of times. But this actually doesn't really pertain to the concept. So okay, so you mean the case with ho, right?
Yes.
with the
Yes.
lesser. So ta ho could be like this if we write taho. But the property of the particle, which includes ha as a foundation of name, usually has the tendency of erasing this punctuation, which is a punctuation that divides a word into different syllables. But the problem is now this is a suffix letter, and we cannot have two foundation of name in a single word. That will be very problematic. So what we do, we just write it like this, tau. But now you may say that, oh, in that case, doesn't ho become the foundation of name? No, it doesn't become. It's still the suffix letter, but it's a way to write so that we can bypass the argument of having something like this. And this you will also see with different other connective particle which has ha as a foundation of name. They will also those will also have this similar property. Not only that, Tumisambuddha, not only Tumisambuddha, also Yangchen Dorje in his text that we are currently learning, the Tree of Excellent speech. What he did is that he has a particular section where he talks about the particles which have ha as a foundation of name and their property. So therefore, instead of this, we just write it like this. And this is only done for this. These days, we tend to do it for other, like those things like for Lakso, we tend to do it like this, but this is not valid. It's just something that's happening with the time. So it's more like we have these things, those digital terms that people use these days. So it's like that. Is it valid? No, it's not valid per se, but do people use it? Yes, they use it. So it's more like a digital thing. So it is also influencing Tibetan language. So lesser. So you see that this is the case where you have, you can write only this in that manner, whereas Lakso should be written like this. How Lakso. So in the case of Ha, it is written like this. So this is the reason why it's written like this. So Lungpe Tao, the edge of the country. We see that when we say ta, which is the edge, which is more ta, it has ha as a suffix letter. So therefore it will be followed by ho. But it's written like this because of the property of this particular particle. Ra, ro. If a name has ra as a suffix letter, it will be followed by ro. Shotang, homa, marro. So since we have mar, which is butter, it has ra as the suffix letter. It is followed by ro. Curd, milk, and butter. Shotang mar, shotang homa marro. Marro. If a name has la as a suffix letter, it is followed by lo. Yuande pello. Here we see that it's not. It's just a phrase which means widening of knowledge. So pello, expansion of knowledge or widening of knowledge. Yuande pello. Since pel has la as a suffix letter, so lo. Sa, so. If a name has sa as a suffix letter, it is followed by so. Gelbu se so. So this is a single derived name. Gelbo means king. Se means the son. Gelbu se, it's the prince. So gese or gelbu se so. So entire phrase. So because it has sa. So prince. Now for this case, we have Tata come, Yangju ta. So it's either Tata or Yangju. It's known as Tata or Yangju ta, which means post suffix letter ta. will have to as connective particle. Di parul to chint to. Go beyond this, whichever is this. So di parul to chinto. It's more or less like a command. So most of the tatra are used for command, or it's used when you write a certain instruction given by Buddha or any other exalted beings. So tame, which means without jinjuk, no suffix letter, will also be followed by ho. So you see this same thing happening here too. You see that even though these require this particular punctuation, here we see that we have skipped this punctuation in this case, that there is no punctuation here, and this is the characteristic of the particle which has o, which has ha. So tering kerang gongse momo sao. So eat momo for dinner today. Since this sa doesn't have any suffix letter, it will be followed by ho, but you're not allowed to use the punctuation, that is this small punctuation known as tsak or tek. We're not allowed to use tek here. So it becomes a single sao. It becomes a single unit because of the property of this. Okay, so this is the rule pertaining the usage of these 11 particles when they follow a name. So okay, so we'll just have a small question. Let's see. Okay, so we'll just see how much of this most of you have understood. So I'll just write a series of words here to see. So let's see. I mean, okay. So if you know the answer, please answer it. So what is the recompound particle used after this? So does anyone so? Why so?
So because sa is the jenchuk which is used, the suffix, and therefore it is followed by so.
Okay, wonderful. Now Okay, what is the recompound particle that will follow this? Who wants to answer this now?
No.
What is the no? Okay, why no? Why do we use no? Yes. So so I haven't froze, is it? Everyone's able to hear me, right?
Yes.
Lasso. So why no? So
Jenchuk na.
Wonderful, because of the Jinju na. Okay. Okay, what is the recompound particle that will follow this? Shoko. Ko. Okay. Why is it ko?
Because of the ka.
Because of the ka, right? Okay. That's so. And okay. What will follow this? So let me change it to the Ujenipa. It's more recognizable that way. I just like the design of the other font. So what will follow this one?
Ciao.
Ho. Okay, so is it okay if I write it like this?
No, I think.
Why?
Just
Why
narrow.
is it just narrow?
Just narrow.
So this is incorrect, right? So what is the change that I need to make with this? What is the property of this particular particle?
To delete R and put narrow.
To delete this, right? So chow, right? Okay, so
Not sure.
so this is chow. So we just delete we see that we have this particular punctuation, right? So when whenever we have this, so let me just even make it bigger so that it's very apparent, because this particular punctuation is not that big. So, okay, so we see that this punctuation, right? The small dot, it's called a sek, which is a punctuation that divides an entire word into different syllable. So we just delete this. And then we add it like this, because this is the property of this particular particle, which has the foundational name as ha. So particle that has foundation of name ha will have this property. And we will also discuss this extensively under the commentary that Yangchen Drubpay Dorje has written. So chow. So this becomes chow. Okay, so now this is the rule pertaining the rules that is pertaining the usage of these particle on the basis of the suffix letter. So now, and today we're going to keep it there, because the usage case, we're going to do it in the next class. We'll talk about the usage case. And then we also have to, we'll also discuss something called Ngönju, and also Mingi Namta. So the thing is that in this particular unit, we will probably learn everything that we have to learn about name, naming word, name and word, and sentences. Not about the sentences, but the sentences of sentences that use lardu as a connective particle. So we'll discuss the usage case in the next class. Okay, so before we go to questioning and answer, so it seems that I haven't provided the next portion for the lecture, Joma. I will be doing that today or tomorrow, most probably tomorrow. I'll be doing it tomorrow. So very sorry for the delay. I was supposed to do it in the previous week, but I will do it in this week, the next portion. So in that case, today you have to give me those who is selected in random. They will have to give me the memorization of the lecture, the Tree of Excellent Speech, from the beginning, Namo Guru Manju Koshaya, to the portion that is the end, which is the usage, the rules of the usage of Lardu on the basis of suffix letter, that particular point. So please, and after that we will do a question answer. You can ask me questions and then I'll answer the questions. Okay, so next time, so one was next. So we won't be selecting next time right now, because I think tomorrow we have Tashila who will be the reading. So tomorrow the memorization, it will be Tashila. But for today, it will be selected in random. So choose any number between 1 to 15. Any number between 1 to 15. So any number between 1 to 15. So we'll wait for 10 more seconds. And if we don't have anyone, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hienla, we have Chenila, we have Devyala, we have Svetala, we have Yurila, and we have Perila. Okay, so now I will be generating the number. So you know how it works. If your number is being selected, then it is you who has to read. If, 14, okay, then 14. And if the number that you have selected is 1 greater than the number that comes, for example, 3 comes, and if your number is 4, then you have to read. But that is only in the case if no one's number will be generated. So 1 to 15. Okay, I will be generating in 1, 2, 3. 1. Do we have 1? Yes, we have 1. It's Hienla. Okay, Hienla. Tashidele Hienla. So please read the portion from the beginning to the to the point where we studied today. Lasso. So you have to start from the beginning, which is the Namo Guru, Anju Koshaya, and to the point that we finish, to the point where we finished today, which is the rule that tells us about the usage of particles on the basis of suffix letter, right? So that particular word, which tells us about it. Okay, so please.
Now I recite.
Lasso.
Yeah. Namo Guru Manju Goshaya. Lama Chok Thang Ye Me He. Jambar Yang La Hu Tu Ne. Turn me like shakes some chu be. Nim Po Dor Du She Barja. Yangchen Jawa Sanboru. Jepa Iu A Oshi. Sanje Kasok Sum Chu Sum Chuyin. Kanga Thana Pama A. Rala Sanam Jechuk Chu. Thang Sani Yang Tukde. Thani Nara La Sum Thang. Sani Ganga Pama Thot. Tha Pama A Yunchuk. Ongo Tono Pomo O. Rolo Soto La Dute. Chok Sik A Tu Chik Yang Ja. Thap Ye Do Thang Tha Me O. Shen Nam Ming Te Je Tun Ja. Je Tun Ja.
Jar. Yes. So very wonderful. So thank you very much for memorizing this, and continue memorizing the text. I will be sending the portion, but until you receive it tomorrow, you can just, once you have memorized to this point, you can go to the next point and then start memorizing. So thank you very much, Hienla. A wonderful lesson. So questions. So if anyone has questions, please ask away. So does anyone have questions regarding today's lesson on Laddu? If you have questions on Laddu, please ask away.
I think there's
Genla,
a
I have a question.
Yes.
Did I interrupt somebody?
Uh,
no, please
so
go ahead.
Oh, Divya, you carry on. I can ask secondly. It's okay.
Lasso. So okay then. Divyala, please ask away.
Okay, so Tenzil, I think I'm not very clear about why are we removing tech when there is no suffix in case of po.
Which one?
In case of po, when there is no suffix, we don't put tech in between po and. So why are we doing that? I think I'm not clear about.
So we already discussed that the prime reason why we actually don't write tu ha is the reason why the property of this particular this particular particle, meaning the particle that has ha as a foundation of name, has the property to remove this. It has the property to be used without this particular punctuation. So the property is not removing tu ha. The property is removing just this. But now if you remove this punctuation, this doesn't make any sense. And that is the reason why we remove the extra ha. So the extra ha is the consequence of removing this syllable. And the property that this particle has is to remove this one. It doesn't have a property to remove this one. This is removed as a consequence of removing this punctuation. Since this punctuation is removed, now this makes no sense if you write it like this. And that's the reason why it is written like this. Therefore, even though sa doesn't have a suffix letter, the property of this is not to remove the suffix letter. The property is to remove the punctuation. So the property is to remove the punctuation, not the suffix. This removal of suffix is just a consequence of removing the punctuation.
So in all cases, whenever ho is the connecting particle, we will put it before, we have to remove the tech, right?
Yes, so not only ho, we will when we will continue learning this text, we will come along with other connective particle which has ha as a foundation of name. And for all of those particles too, we will remove the tech. But there are some exceptions, but we will also discuss which are those exceptions. In some exceptions where it is okay if you remove it, but you can also use it without removing it. So, but we will talk about those in that particular lesson. But in today's lesson, it has the property to remove this, and it must always be used by removing the particular syllable, the particular punctuation.
Lasso. Thank you.
Lasso. So now I think it's it was Farizala, right? Was it?
Yes, Genla.
Lasso.
Again, a silly question. To ask
please ask away.
So these 11 recompounded particles which we're using, what if we don't use them? What difference would it make in the sentence or the narrative?
Okay, so definitely we know that these 11 connective particle, in this case, we know that it only functions as to show that something has concluded, but sadly, none of them have any meaning to be translated, you see? So when we translate it, none of them have any meaning, meaning that you don't translate it at all. But when you, and this seems like normally in English, we use different type of punctuations to show the end of a narration, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, in Tibetan, definitely we have certain punctuations, but this particular term, this particular connected particle, what it does is that it individualizes, making it into a single unit.
The separator, basically.
It's basically separator of narratives. But the more important thing that it does is it is very, very relevant with the definition of the first grammatical case, where we had that thing called individual, right? Individually. So these particle actually makes it individually. So that its meaning, the meaning of that particular narrative doesn't mix with other meanings. So it has an individual meaning, and to sustain that individuality, it is used only during, but that is only during the first grammatical case, but not during other cases.
So you mean to say that it is more relevant when there is a huge paragraph and then there are a lot of contents there, and when it wants to bifurcate the contents, then this is more meaningful, it would be more meaningful?
In the context that you say, I don't think this is the exact thing I said. I said that it is very much more apparent as a usage when you use it with a single name or single word. Though it also functions definitely it functions to split those different narratives into their own individual system or narrative. But the more like you see that what is like when we have to say like what is the significance of this, you know, because you can say like, oh, in paragraphs we can also have those punctuations, what's the big deal? But you'll see that the significance of these particle only comes into a very significant role when it is used with singular name. There we have to protect the individuality of the name or the meaning. Otherwise, when we are using it at the end of a sentence or a phrase, the meaning has already associated with other, the name has already started associating with other names, right? So the concept of individuality becomes much, much vague when it's a longer structure of or longer chain, right? When it's a longer chain, the concept of individual meaning becomes more vague. Then you feel like, oh, what individuality? It has already associated with this many words. You see? But therefore it becomes more essential and more significant with just one name to retain its individuality. But an entire narrative as an individuality is also attained by the usage of this. But in that case, the meaning of the name as an individual becomes very vague. So it doesn't, it's almost non-existent at that time, at that case.
Okay, this is clear. The other one is this used also in the spoken language, or is it only in the written this is used?
It's used in spoken language also. It is also used in spoken language. And most of the time it's used in spoken language as of, in most of the time it's used in things like riddles and poetry also, when someone's speaking in poetry, you know. So there's something called speaking in poetry. So if someone's speaking in poetry, so they definitely use this. But most of the time it is used in written language. So yes.
Thank you.
Lasso. Okay, so does anyone have one more question? Or if not, then I have something to clarify regarding the relation case that we have, classification relation. It's something that many seem no. So therefore, this is the most difficult concept in Tibetan, most difficult particle to comprehend in Tibetan, because not because of the usage. The usage is simple, but they just say like, what is the significance? Why do we need it? Because you don't translate it, but it's like something like it's more or less like a particle that seems to be functioning only in Tibetan language. But when you try to use it in the English, try to translate it, it doesn't have any translation. We just call it recompound particle because of the function, but definitely there isn't any equivalent in English. And therefore, it is very difficult to comprehend this when it comes to understanding it through the English perspective. So this is the most hardest to, this is only most hardest to accept as an existence. That's it. But the usage is very simple. Only the acceptance to come to the point where you say like, yes, I acknowledge that you exist. And your existence makes sense to me in my own perception. That's the most difficult for this one. And everyone, when I have taught it even in the past, looking at in the more English perspective, everyone is saying, oh, this particle doesn't need to exist. We can always use the punctuation. And I'm saying, no, this is purely something that has to do with the Tibetan structure. So therefore, the structure of Tibetan language, therefore it exists in that way. Many of time people have been very angry with the existence of these particles when I have taught it in the English perspective. So, lesser. Okay, so I will now clarify a small thing. So last time when we were talking about the classification relation of 3 of kind, 4 of kind, mutually inclusive, mutually exclusive, many of you have been understanding something like, for example, if it fulfills the definition of a name, and if it's a type of a name, that it has to be a name. But now the other way around is something that you must also think about. You're thinking in a way that you're saying like, oh, the derived name, the actual or an actual arbitrary name, the actual arbitrary name is a name. So therefore it should be same as a name. It should be mutually inclusive with the name, but that is not the case. For something to be mutually inclusive, what has to be the case is that it should go 2-way around. That is, if it is a name, it should be if it's a name, it has to be like, if it's an arbitrary name, it has to be a name. This is fulfilled. Definitely, if it's an arbitrary name, it is a name. But now we have to look at in the reverse way. You have to say, if it is a name, it has to be an arbitrary name. So if it fulfills this criteria, then it is mutually inclusive. To say that if it's an arbitrary name is the same as saying it's a name, then definitely these both are mutually inclusive. But if it's a case where if it's an arbitrary name, it's a name. But if it's a name, it can be something else. It can be derived name. It can be designated name. So therefore, we must understand. So therefore, for that very thing, the clarification has to be made. And this comes only because of not being able to classify things as a to be a generality of a phenomena or to be particular of a phenomena. So let me give you an example. So let's take a house. A house is a house, there is no doubt. A wooden house is also a house. There is no doubt. But does that mean that every existing house is a wooden house? No, because there is a house made of stone. There is a house made of grass. There is a house made of bricks. And probably some house which are made of iron. Who knows, metal. But we see that this is the difference between a particular and a generality. A generality is very much pervasive, meaning that anything that fulfills the criteria of being a house comes under that generality, and that generality can represent that in any case. But if it is a particular, it is like a special case. It cannot represent everything that comes under that generality. So generality is pervasive to particular. Therefore, if it is a name, it is not a derived name. But if it's a derived name, it is a name. Derived actual name, it's a name. So this is something that I wanted to clarify, so that now you can have a better understanding of how this works. And I will do more clarification with the addition of more logic. We have just been started with the classification relation. After that, we will talk about the generality and particularity. Then we will talk about a separate phenomena and one phenomena. All of these logic, which is the basis of the epistemology, we will discuss, because these come under the grammar, because it is a very important tool which comes under grammar. Because grammar, what is a grammar? Grammar is a way to give a message, a proper message. And therefore, we will include all of these things. Most of the basic epistemology we will talk about in this class in the most thorough manner, with as good example as possible, and without trying to make it as complex as, to make it as simple as possible. And if you have questions regarding those, make sure that you ask me those questions, because these logical tools are going to be very, very, very useful to you when you start analyzing everything, not only grammar. Okay, so I think this is it for today. And I'll send you the homework later. And some of you have not submitted the homework, so make sure that you submit it. And I will send you the feedback. And those who have already finished, and those of you whose homework I've already checked and I have given you feedback, please share them in the group, and then all of you can discuss it in the group. Make sure to ask questions, and make sure to memorize, and make sure to revise. And this is it for today. And thank you very much for joining in for the Tibetan Grammar class of the Tree of Excellent Speech. I will see you all tomorrow for the basic, probably all of you, or depends. So tomorrow for the basic conversation class. So thank you very much.